Vancouver from the Czech Republic, and Mr. Tim Stevens from New Zealand. Would you all give them a very warm welcome, please? We are all used to in New South Wales. There are two special differences. First, each team is allowed one additional speech in reply at the end. And secondly, during each of the main speeches, members of the opposing team may jump up and interject. These are called points of information. It is up to the speaker holding the floor whether he or she accepts such point of information. We now move to the formal part of the proceedings. It is the motion before this House that sport brings out its best in us. Members of the government from the Southern Highlands are Dominique Ogilvy, representing Frenchman School, Lucinda O'Brien, representing Ghazali College, and Tim Campbell, representing Oxford College. Members of the opposition from Pakistan are Ahmed Murad Akhtar, Riyaz Hussain, and Mehryar Ghazali. Would you give each of the two teams a very warm welcome also, please?
Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, to commence this debate, the proposers would like to examine the terminology used in this motion, that sport brings out the best in us. We, as the proposers, interpret this to mean that involvement in sport, that being direct, as in participation, or perhaps indirect, as in spectators, or any other method of exposing us to the sporting activities and its effects on society, surface our most excellent or superlative aspects of our physique and most importantly of our character. We have defined us to mean you and me, everyone at a personal level and humanity on a global level. As the proposers of today's debate, we will delve into the value of sport to us as individuals and members of the global community, and we shall establish why it is that sport brings out the best in us and how this occurs. Here is how we interpret this topic. Sport is a huge field, and thus we must look at this debate today in a general way. We believe that sport is of immense value to our world. It trains us to persevere, to be self-disciplined in all walks of life. Through team sport and group training, we can figure out a collegiate spirit. Yet we feel that the most vital role sport plays in our world today is the providing the common ground for the whole world to compete and explore their capacity to achieve on, free from social, economic, political or racial influences. This in itself shows the great importance of sport in our world. So why does this bring out the best attributes in us? It is because the benefits from sport that we receive, such as self-discipline, collegiate spirit, and the ability to bring us all down to the same level, teach and free us in such a way that our most excellent qualities are brought to the surface and are allowed to shine through in us. This is somewhat similar to perhaps an orange, you might say. We peel off our inhibiting, unsavory exterior, and thus we can access the bounteous fruit of the inside. Through sport, we can discover personality, ambitions, and limitations. We can discover these through sport because it frees us from the limitations which are imposed on us by our society. It gives us a medium for which to discover our strengths and limitations, not only as physique, but as character. And in an environment which is equalized, defined, and controlled. The courage and perseverance and personality in sport, and the exposure which people have to the athletes going through this, is what induces this emotion of relief. This spring of character is capable of bringing out the best in us as individuals or as a part of the global community. Today we are proposing that sport brings out the best in us, and to illustrate the verity of this fact, I will discuss the intrinsic value of sport to the individual, and Lucinda, our second speaker, will discuss the importance of sport to our global community, and in more detail, the value of sport to spectators. I will assume that it is evident to everyone here today that sport is going to benefit us physically. It's obvious, isn't it? I mean, someone who participates participates in sport a few times a week is going to be much better physical condition than someone who does not. This is elementary, and if it were the issue of today's debate, there would not be a lot for our opposition to argue. However, it is not the issue of today's debate. The issue is much more deep than this, ladies and gentlemen. The issue is how sport affects our character. Does it bring out the best in us as people, not just bodies? And the answer is yes, it does indeed. What changes? Not just physically, but psychologically too. In sport, we must be dedicated. Perseverance is vital in order to achieve personal goals. Whether we are competing against ourselves or others, if we want success, we must be self-disciplined enough to do what is required to reach these goals. It applies in every life situation. But the point of this is that when we are training in sport, it is also training for other areas of our life. Thus, through practice and focus in sport, we will be effectively benefited in other areas that we want to
Don't you feel that the modern sporting world compels athletes to win at all costs?
No, I do not feel it. I feel that it is up to the individual. They are aiming for their personal best. If the best in the world happens to come along with this, that is fantastic, but however, we are aiming for our personal best in general in sport. Never give up. Give it your best shot. Just do it. These are all sporting slogans. However, these mottos apply to other areas in life. Sport does bring out the best in us through the perseverance that it installs within us. By utilising what sport teaches us, we can improve in everything until we reach our personal best in whatever we attempt in life. Sport not only trains us, but lifts up our self-esteem.
Yes. Do you believe sports only bring out positive and good things in us?
I do not believe this, but I do believe that sport brings out the best in us. Confidence gained through sporting activities and successes gives us an edge that will help us in other fields in life. The more you believe you can achieve, the more you will achieve. Sport gives us the integrity and the surge that will propel us in life and push us to reach our limitations and boundaries. The thing that is so fantastic about sport, ladies and gentlemen, is that no matter what your goals, whether or not you're in team sport, whether or not you win or lose, you can reap the benefits from sport. If bad policies are brought out by loss, the best is still brought out. But how? You can't always get what you want. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a vital lesson which we all should learn within our lifetime. And thus, through losing in sport, we in fact gain psychologically.
Do you feel that the Colombian footballers were smarter for scoring a goal or reap the benefits of losing in sport?
I believe that this is a reflection on society, not on the sport. If someone is murdered, then it is a problem with the society, not a problem with the sport. Not accepted. You can't always get what you want. So losing in sport, we in fact gain because psychologically we are prepared in life for when we can't get what we want. When we do not get what we want, we know how to accept this and thus how to act upon it. Therefore, sport does bring out the best. It frees our minds and trains us, making and provoking our best to rise to the surface of our character and shine through. Sport is a medium through which we can discover the character strengths and limitations because it provides a defined and controlled environment. There are rules in sport which everybody must obey. For example, in rugby, you cannot pass the ball forward because you are from Ireland. Or in hockey, you cannot hit the ball with the back of your stick because your income is $6.5 billion a year. Sport has no favourites. It is unbiased. And thus it is free of society imposing limitations. It is a great equaliser in the financial world. Sport provides a common ground for the whole world to participate on and be equal. For example, if we have a Bangladeshi soccer team who have been training on the dirt pitch all their life in bare feet with a soccer ball which they have thrown together themselves, they have every chance of coming up against a German team who have been training with the best equipment on an excellent piece of turf. And they have every chance of winning because because the thing that is so special about sport is it comes down to skill and dedication. This has been seen time and time again as so-called underdogs for people who have not had the best facilities have come up and risen and won. It gives everyone the opportunity to be the best or better the best. This does not occur in any other field in life. It is the medium through which we can discover our strengths and limitations because it provides a defined and controlled environment for me. Thus, ladies and gentlemen, you can now see that sport does bring out the best in us.
Nine minutes and 10 seconds. I have pleasure in calling upon the first speaker of the opposition, Mehryar.
Ladies and gentlemen, the proposition here is try to confuse you and beguile you by dealing with the issue in its ideological context alone. We believe that we must deal with the topic in the realistic nature it is being presented as. And that is what this topic demands. How sport exists in the world, not what the ideal of sport really means. Ladies and gentlemen, first the definition. Sport, pastime stressing physical skill and strength, encompassing a wide range of individual and team athletes. Best would be the finest human quality. Us would entail both sportsmen as well as people who watch or follow sport. Therefore, our interpretation is as follows. Sport calls to bring out to the fore finest human qualities in people. That is what the topic says. Our stance for the topic, ladies and gentlemen, is sports simply reflect the qualities of the individual or the community. They do not bring out any special qualities, especially not the finest human qualities. Our strategy to that be as follows. I, as the first speaker, will prove to you how the intense competition in general life of society culminates in a rat race in sport. The second speaker will prove to you how commercialism, violence and intolerance, and politics are a part and parcel of sport as they are part and parcel of society. The third speaker will deal mainly with reputation. Ladies and gentlemen, here we must understand the most crucial point of the debate, and that is that society has certain values and certain trends and customs. And it is those which come out in sports. Sports do not cause a change in the individual. They simply bring out the qualities of that individual. And there are many times when we have harsh and rash qualities coming out. Many times when we have incidents when qualities are expressed which simply cannot be stated as finest qualities. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic here is an absolute one. We are talking about most humane. And as we will do with you, violence, intolerance, politics, are there, and they show you how to be humane qualities. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, in society, there is a general rat race to achieve, an excessive competition to do well, and there is a growing trend to achieve by whichever means that is possible. Ladies and gentlemen, ends are just ideas. And that is exactly what is also being done in sports. Ladies and gentlemen, in society we have competition for the workplace, in jobs, in entrance examinations. We have excessive competition to do well. Excessive competition, which surely cannot be defined. And that is exactly what we are seeing in sports today. Excessive competition. Sports are being driven, are being well as that of the person. The fact that they are striving to achieve may be a noble gesture, but the fact remains that the means they use are not. And therefore the qualities that are being expressed are the qualities of brutal rashness and brutal competition, in which they may use any means that is possible to win money when denied. Ladies and gentlemen, what are we seeing in the world today? What are the best athletes in the world? Users of steroids and drugs. Will put injurious to health and therefore again prove that they are surely better for the physique, and which are also inherently unfair. Ladies and gentlemen, in Atlanta this year we have had 3 gold medalists stripped off their medals because they were taking drugs. And we know that it's nearly impossible to ensure that no one will take drugs. And when in what has been acclaimed as the best tournament of sports in the world, we have something like this going on. Surely sports are not bringing out the best human qualities. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact remains that it is very, very, very difficult to trace steroids, and they are being actively used by nations in fact, not alone individuals to promote sports. And that is not the only strategy that sports is used. That is just one. There are many more which I will go on. Ladies and gentlemen, what are other means that sports are using? They are cheating. Cheating to the extreme. And when we talk about cheating, it is not purely on individual grounds. We also have a trend of discrimination. For instance, in Iran, women cannot play sports. The only reason why Iran may be forced to send a woman out in an international sport is because it's a requirement of the rural community. But still, they are not given equal opportunity to make a part of sports. Ladies and gentlemen, just a very small list of people who have the steroids to basically make people happy. Ben Johnson won the 100 meters men's final. Then we have Catherine Tabor who won the 100-meter women's. And we have allegations against Chinese and Russian athletes. Surely they do form a very large part. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact remains that sportsmen, that in the world as we know it, that has been happening, and there are very strong allegations against our very own country that flags are being kicked. And they are being kicked regularly. The fact remains, because of the money, because of the need to win and sell, you have cheating. You have means being used which cannot be justified, but are. And they are being justified on the basis of one single basis alone. That is, the winning may not be everything, but it is surely be safe. Ladies and gentlemen, the proposition of trying to make you believe that sport will bring out the best enough because it is an ideal. There is no practical proof that they do. The world as we know it has shown in sports youth and in sports lives.
Takes minutes and 4 seconds. Calling on the Secretary Speaker for the Government, Jacinda O'Brien. Thank you, Jacinda.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can see a very, very serious deviation here over the question of definitions. The opposition would have you believe that ideology has no reference when discussing the place of sport in our society. I would say that this is totally, totally wrong. How can you discuss purely and without bias any kind of political or
that violence and intolerance are brought out by sport. But she also made a very pertinent comment that these are in fact factors in our society. I thank you very much for pointing this out, because to me it seems that this is obviously of a great deal of relevance to the debate. Sport is a reflection of society, it's true, but if it's a reflection of society, it must also be a reflection of humanity, thus reflecting the fallible nature of the human species. We can't expect it to be perfect, but we may expect it to bring out the best in us among us humans. You also claim that sports don't cause changes in individuals. I would say this is obviously untrue. Can you say that Kieran Perkins was the same before he started his vigorous training program before Barcelona? And he is now. He has 2 gold medals under his belt. He is obviously a very different person. That's second.
Whether those changes are for the best, even if those changes are there.
Of course they're for the best. And then, just because not all the qualities enhanced by sport are good ones, that doesn't mean that the good ones aren't there. Of course there are going to be cheats, liars, frauds. There are also going to be a great deal of pure human achievement. Accepting competition in our society, I strongly disagree. Competitiveness, again, is part of human nature, and that does not necessarily mean it is a bad part. I would also like to reiterate my comment that steroids are not at all an intrinsic part of the sporting experience. You can hardly claim that it is the definitive reflection on sport. I'll now continue with our case. Involvement in sport provides opportunities for self-discovery and self-development free from the imposed constraints of conflicting political or social ideologies. Objectivity in the pursuit of excellence is evident particularly at elite levels, where athletes compete internationally, representing their respective nations. Because of this national representation and the highly competitive nature of the elite sporting community, international competitions such as the Olympic Games spark intense feelings of nationalism among both competitors and spectators. People all over the world are filled with pride at their compatriots' victories and achievements, and the athletes themselves become representatives of their nation's strength and rejected. Nationalism in this sense is an integral part of the sporting experience, inspiring and motivating competitors and enhancing spectator experience. Perhaps the more significant phenomenon, particularly in highly prestigious events such as the Olympic Games, is this sense of internationalism, of a global community. For many, such international sporting events are their only contact with the people of other countries. Rejected, be it directly in contact with the competitors or often simply the broadened awareness of TV viewers over the world. The athletes' fellowship and unity for a common purpose promote cross-cultural empathy and harmony. Among the many examples offered at the current Olympic Games in Atlanta, I'm reminded of a 12-year-old Cambodian, one of only 3 representatives of her country competing in swimming events. Unfamiliar with the system of the Olympic Games, she vaulted on the starting block and finished some 30 seconds after the winner of her event. Nevertheless, as she climbed out of the pool, she was given a standing ovation by the Americans at Atlanta.
Speaking about the Atlanta crowd, competitors such as Cubans and other countries from the United States are complaining that the crowd is booing them so much that they can't concentrate on their sport. So what international harmony are you thinking about?
I would say it's not an exceptional case. What can be better for global relations than such indiscriminate comradeship? This comradeship, which transcends barriers of cultural or political disparity, is founded on the physical, purely human nature of sport itself, where individuals participate as equals. On the sporting field, there are no unfair advantages, no prejudices, and no unjust or discriminatory rules or policies. The integrity of sport rests on this, the objective appreciation of human achievement. Again, an example springs to mind. Kathy Freeman, Australia's great gold medal champ in women's running, was internationally I would say it is totally exemplary of the Olympic spirit, which is my point. In adopting this attitude, Freeman attracted considerable praise, both for herself and her country, for so accurately representing the perceived Olympic spirit. In this Olympic spirit lies the definition of sport, both for the individual and the community, ethics, achievement, the renouncement of personal resentment and prejudices, companionship and unity of cause and objectives. This unity of purpose and the dedication and perseverance of the athlete is a source of inspiration to all aspiring athletes, and sports people, indeed, to achieve in every aspect of life. It has been said that sport is the great equaliser. Once in the pool, on the field or on the track, the athlete can rely on nothing but his or her personal skills and abilities. Thus, economically disadvantaged countries, such as Kenya, have been able to repeatedly volunteer surprising champions, such as their long-distance runners, whose successes have been earned totally independently through persistence and determination. In fact, these people, more than Westerners, epitomise the benefits of the Olympic spirit because its demands have inspired them to such exceptional levels of motivation and achievement. Therefore, sport provides a unique environment for achievement, where participants are liberated from imposed social and economic restrictions which inhibit individual growth. Through sport, individuals have the opportunity to explore their capabilities and achieve their goals.
7 minutes, 28 seconds. Thank you, Jacinta. I now have pleasure in calling on the second speaker of the opposition, Leanne Hussain. Thank you, Leanne.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The proposition has just made it very clear that they agree that sport is a reflection of society as it is today. Look around you, ladies and gentlemen. What does a society signify? It signifies racism. It signifies poverty. It signifies injustice, dishonesty, corruption. And yet, we do agree that sport is a reflection of this society. However, does that mean that sport brings out the best in us? Ladies and gentlemen, for the proposition to be true to today's motion, they have to prove that sport is an activity which proves an exception to the rule. They have to prove that sport is beyond this racism, that sport is beyond this corruption and this intolerance and this politics. And they're not even attempting to prove that. They have already accepted that sport do bring out negative qualities, and that is exactly the stance of the opposition. We are not saying that sport has no benefits to society. That would be an absurdity and it would be extremely difficult to prove and beyond the promotion. What we are saying tonight, what we are saying is that sport reflects society. Its bad point, its good point. It is not an exception which merely underlines the best point. It is not the final form of human activity. It is an ordinary form of human activity with the evil and the good. Yes. For some people, prostitution may bring out the best in them, but I will not call them the final form. tradition has passed on about sporting internationalism, how the Olympics are beyond ordinary racism and ordinary prejudice. The Chinese division, one of the largest in the Atlanta Olympics, has consistently accused the Atlanta management of racism. The Cubans have accused the American people of racism. The Ukrainian gymnasts have accused the American people of racism. Pakistan has refused to compete with Israel because it has an anti-Israeli stance. So how can we say that sports, that the Olympics are removed from the prejudices that we see in society today? That is a very unsubstantiated assumption on their part. And they gave the example of Kathy Freeman. What they very conveniently failed to mention was that Kathy Freeman also got into a lot of trouble because she, instead of carrying an Australian flag in the Commonwealth, they insisted on carrying the Aboriginal flag, and therefore proving that sectarian and ethnic differences do persist in the sporting world. The sporting world is not beyond racism and racial differences tonight. If the sport gives an equal platform to everyone, well, I doubt that it gives an equal platform to Iranian women who are only allowed to show their eyes, and I don't believe that they can be very athletic wearing a tape around their body. The legal proposition just gives that the individuals win even if they win, and even if they lose. Well, that may be true in Australia, but certainly not in Pakistan. In Pakistan, win the cricket match, we go to the airport to receive them with garlands and roses. If they lose the cricket match, we go to receive them with shoes and boxing gloves. The proposition is that steroids are the two sports, but ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make that the steroids are a growing problem, and that is why so many resources are dedicated to detection. It has now been historically proven that the East European sporting machine in the 1960s and in the pre-Cold War era was heavily dependent on steroids. So for them to say that steroids is an isolated exception is unsubstantiated. Now moving on to my independent argument. The first speaker of the proposition just came and said that one of the slogans of world sport today is just do it. Ladies and gentlemen, this slogan is typical of the commercialization and the cheapening and adulteration of sport as it is today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a money-obsessed society where everyone is obsessed with making money at the cost of principle. And what we are saying is that sports remain no exception. Sporting principles are being compromised to make money. Right now, let's look at the major sources we have around the world today. We have the real cricket world stamp. We have the Benson and Hedges cricket series. We have the red and white cricket snooker tournament in Pakistan. We have the Virginia Flint Women's Tennis Association. We have the Johnny Walker Ryder Cup. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been proven that tobacco and alcohol are detrimental to sporting ability. However, despite that, these tobacco and alcohol agencies are allowed to sponsor sporting events. Sporting principles are being compromised for commercialism. Certain sports, such as the World Wrestling Federation, have been taken merely to feed commercialism. The World Wrestling Federation, ladies and gentlemen, is more choreographed than ballet, the part of the sport. Then let's talk about the Olympics, the cheapening commercialism of the Olympics. The Olympics, ladies and gentlemen, principle dictated that they be held in Greece, from where they originated. According to one Greek athlete, it seems that a fizzy drink and a few $1 billion in advertising rights are more important than sporting ideology and principles. Olympic let's talk about internationalism, ladies and gentlemen. Olympic telecasts today are too expensive for third world nations to get television rights. Thus, people like in Pakistan cannot even see the Olympics. So what kind of internationalism are they speaking of? Then they spoke about Christianity and team spirit. Team spirit is being overridden by the money. Players are no longer staying affiliated to teams with whom they have some bonding, just staying affiliated to the higher bidder. We have the example of defections of prominent tennis players such as Martina Navratilova and Ivan Bendel from the Czech Republic or to the United States, where they for more lucrative commercial contracts. We have the example of match fixing, of teams agreeing with gamblers to lose matches to make money. So where is the society and integrity that we are speaking of? I understand your point. In Malaysia, the entire football league has been disbanded at the moment. The entire football league, ladies and gentlemen, all the teams, because the majority of them were found to be indulgent in this country. So much for that. Then we come to violence. We are living in an inherently violent society. This is the age of terrorism. This is the age of individual violence. And sports, again, is no exception. Sports is doing our negative quality. We have certain sports which are bloody in nature, such as blood sports such as bullfighting, cockfighting, fox hunting, and we have taken these are good sports. And then we have certain violent sports such as boxing, kickboxing, and I thought more importantly, we have spectator violence. The cricket World Cup semi-final in Calcutta was cancelled, ladies and gentlemen, because the Indian people set fire in half the stadium. They began pelting the Sri Lankan players with stones. What is the spectator participation they're speaking of? We have the prime example of football hooliganism around the world. And finally, we have politics. Sports have always been used for political expediency. The prime example being the Nazi resistance in 1936, which Hitler used to propagate Nazi propaganda, to propagate Nazi superiority, and also political nationalism, such as in Bangalore, which quarterfinal between Pakistan and India, which are political rivals, was made into a battlefield. The spectators were pelting the Pakistani players. They were not applauding them. The spectators were not appreciating good athleticism. They were just waging a war. An example of the US and Cuban athletes when they are on the field together. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the end, I would like to stress that sport is as effective of the negative part of the psychology as the positive, and therefore does not become effective.
Eight minutes and 10 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it falls to me to summarise the details of this debate, the important details. Probably the easiest way to do this would be to examine each team's case and how it relates to today's topic, that sport brings out the best in us. We feel that there are some serious flaws in the case presented by the opposition. For example, the opening speaker for the opposition tried to convince the House that sports reflect qualities rather than bring out qualities. I would ask, how do we discern between the two? How do we know what was there and what wasn't before the influence of society? I notice also a disturbing trend in the opposition case in that they focus entirely on elite athletes. No mention as yet has been made about recreational sport. Thus, their arguments considering cheats and people who use steroids, I would say that they are still a minority, in that elite athletes are a minority themselves, and cheats who use steroids are only a small percentage of those elite athletes.
70,000 people just run up stadium in Calcutta.
I don't see how that relates to what I've just been talking about. The majority of people are involved in sport for recreation, rather than to achieve goals or to make money. As such, very few are actually under much pressure to win. As such, I would also reject the opposition's habit of interchanging the words sport and competition. The second opposition, accepted.
Is it competitive in the inherent part of sport?
Not in terms of recreational sport. Perhaps elite sport, but recreational sport is a major proportion of the sport that is undertaken in the world today. The second opposition speaker said that society is representative of racism and of sexism and all that sort of thing. I disagree there, in that they are not major parts of society. They are people repressing minorities perhaps, but it is not representative of society as a whole. Again, the second speaker said that cheating is the norm, and I would point again to the fact that most people are involved in sport for recreational purposes. Accepted.
Are you saying that in school when kindergarten kids play sports, bite, scratch, and kick each other and bully each other, they are not bringing out any bad qualities?
Most 5-year-olds kick, scratch and bite each other anyway. I'd be inclined to turn now to our case. Our first speaker told of how sports develop personal physique and personal character, bringing out traits such as commitment, dedication, perseverance and integrity. She also told of the benefits to the individual and the global community. She told of how sports is the great equaliser, putting us all on an even footing with other people. How it frees a person's character from social inhibition. She told us, most importantly perhaps, of how sport allows us to explore our limits and push our boundaries, making us better people and bringing out better qualities in us. Finally, she told us of how sport trains us for disappointment in life. Surely everybody here has suffered some disappointment during their life. Sport is one way of preparing us for such disappointment and teaching us how to cope. Our second speaker told about how sport removes inhibitions and how it promotes nationalism and internationalism. She told us the great sportsmanship that is developed through sport, particularly of people like Kathy Freeman and others. She told us a renouncement of personal prejudices in favour of common goals, that is the goal of excellence. Perhaps the greatest examples of determination and achievement are disabled athletes. I believe the Paralympics are either on at the moment or on very shortly. And many of the athletes in that have come back from horrendous accidents and disabilities and have brought themselves to a stage where they can compete on an even footing with people throughout the world. Accepted?
Does not sport discriminate with that television published that money to disabled athletes and something like that?
I would ask, does sport discriminate or does society discriminate? Other people, other athletes, suffer injury and still continue in their chosen sport, utilising resources that might otherwise have been left dormant. A great example of this was Nicole Bishop, the Australian equestrian, who broke a collarbone and several ribs, and yet still got back on her horse and finished the event. She was even prepared the next morning to ride again, deliberately not taking any painkillers or anything of the sort, any medicines, so that she would be able to do that if need be. Accepted. I would say that it's a dedication to the team and loyalty to the team through the friendships and loyalties formed through their sport. Indeed, I myself have seen people continue to play sports despite broken ribs, broken collarbones, whatever, that would make it extremely painful and difficult for them to continue. And yet they do it because of their dedication and loyalty that are formed through sport. I would exhort the House this afternoon to recognise that sport does bring out the best qualities in us. Thank you.
7 minutes, 29 seconds.
Britannia Encyclopedia, which is simply full of sport in itself. What you heard today from the proposition was a beautiful, lovely, extravagant piece of rhetoric, and nothing more. Supplemented, ladies and gentlemen, with, as they would term it, exemplary examples. And when we would quote an example, well, they would be extremely exceptional and therefore unexemplary according to the proposition. Ladies and gentlemen, the debate is really centered around the fact whether we are debating an ideological issue or something which is a realistic issue. But ladies and gentlemen, this was not a normative issue. The topic was sport brings out the best in us. And the proposition felt like, well, thought that the topic was sport brings out the best in us amongst other things. That was the perception of the proposition, and they raised points of information saying, well, what about amongst other things? Well, amongst other things is not amongst the context of this debate, members of the government. Ladies and gentlemen, what were they really supposed to do there today? They were supposed to prove in some way that yes, sports are bringing out the best in us. But we, the opposition, ladies and gentlemen, came up with a very reasonable and a very fair stance. We said that sports do not bring out the best in us, rather they reflect what really exists in society. They reflect both the positive values that exist in society and the negative values which do persist. We never said that they do bring out the best in us. We gave a clear and concise stance. And ladies and gentlemen, sadly as it is, the proposition has not countered our stance, ladies and gentlemen. They have not disagreed with us to an extent where we can say, yes, they have made a debate out of it, ladies and gentlemen. Rather, they have stuck to their rhetorical stance, which really is not substantiated by any example or any very convincing solid argument. The first speaker, ladies and gentlemen, came up, and her job here was to prove today that individuals are coming together, how it promotes harmony, equality, peace, etc., etc. Ladies and gentlemen, she probably said a lot about equality, peace, etc., etc., but she never went on to prove with any solid example how her point stands. It was all unsubstantiated, sweeping statements that there is equality, there is peace, there is internationalism, there is this and there is that. But ladies and gentlemen, we the opposition gave the example time and again. Well, there is nothing of the sort that the proposition is proposing. They mention things like steroids being an exceptional case. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there are entire testing committees at almost every sporting event around the globe, examining almost every athlete from every corner of the world for checking them whether they've taken any sort of drug or steroids, and the proposition here conveniently terms that as exceptional. Well, we say that's exemplary. Ladies and gentlemen, similarly, they have also ignored the fact, well, they agree that sports do reflect society. But that is exactly what we have been saying. Thank you very much for your agreement. We say yes, sport is reflective of society, sportsmen are a part of society, and they reflect society's values. The second speaker mentioned the wars that have occurred, and despite it, sportsmen are now used for political expediency, as in it's now becoming more of a political sphere. For example, there was this game going on in Libya between two parties, and they were playing. And in fact, on one side there was General Gaddafi's son. But what happened was that, unfortunately, one of the sides lost. And so what the side did first was that they shot the referee, and then they started shooting each other. And at the end of the day, they had a pretty good bloodbath in the stadium. So what if the proposition has believed that that is an exceptional? Well, it's an extreme case, but it does represent, ladies and gentlemen, what extent sport has gone to and what it really is representing at this present moment, and that is what needs to be examined, ladies and gentlemen. Similarly, ladies and gentlemen, they spoke about the, well, their idea of exemplary example was where a Cambodian swimmer made a fall, and he was lost by about 30 seconds in the crowd responded. Well, I applaud that example, ladies and gentlemen, but that is an extremely isolated example to base an entire case upon. And ladies and gentlemen, among other things, they went on to say, recreational sport. Ladies and gentlemen, recreational sport was not brought into this debate until the third speaker came up here and mentioned it. They never even brought recreational sport into their strategy, into their stance, and into their definition. And very conveniently, because they felt, well, it's not really an ideological debate, they decided, well, they should probably bring something else in, which perhaps would be debated on ideology, and that is recreational debate where 5-year-olds are playing. And ladies and gentlemen, then we said, what about these 5-year-olds kicking and biting each other? And the proposition then said, well, that's a society, isn't it? Exactly, ladies and gentlemen, that is society. 5-year-olds biting, kicking, and slapping each other because they can't play in a game or can't win a game is reflective of today's present society. And that is what we've been pointing out, and that is what they admit to, yet just for the, well, for formality, just to put aside the formality of denying what we are saying, they raise their arguments, which is, ladies and gentlemen, though perhaps slightly plausible, not that well. Ladies and gentlemen, we on the opposition have told you that this debate is not about ideology alone. We told you this is a realistic issue that we are debating. It is a positive issue, not a normative issue. What needed to be done, ladies and gentlemen, was that the proposition had to discuss this in realistic terms. The proposition had to bring us something nice, some examples that, well, we could say this is difficult to counter. But that is what they haven't done. We were waiting for them to do something like that, ladies and gentlemen. They have not done that. Their examples were isolated for one, and we, the opposition, I think, countered this off fairly well. We told you that society is being reflected in today's sport. The action, what society really inspires for. They mentioned things like internationalism, ladies and gentlemen. We told you this is a discriminating society. Internationalism does not exist. Then they said nationalism is a good thing. Well, what about the nationalism that has led to so many converting sport into some kind of political warfare, ladies and gentlemen? That is the extreme nationalism that is now inherent in sport. That is what is diluting sport. This extreme nationalism, which the proposition here was mentioning, is something which is what is now making sport to the extent where you can label sport as something political. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard our case, you have heard their rhetorical case. It was not a case, it was simply a nice bedtime story. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg you to let the moment stand.
7 minutes and 35 seconds. Thank you, Mehryar. I now have great pleasure in calling on Mehryar to present the opposition speech and reply. I remind you that during the speeches and reply, no points of information may be raised. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I come to speak from here because it seems to me the proposition fails to understand anything when it says from there. Ladies and gentlemen, what did the topic demand from us? It demanded only one simple thing. For us to understand that sports are something which are supposed to bring out some qualities. Ladies and gentlemen, we as the opposition showed you that they simply bring out those qualities which are in us. And ladies and gentlemen, we can't all be arrogant enough to believe that the qualities that are within us are the best. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have been trying to stress here, and what they've been failing to understand is that a grouch remains a grouch after playing a sport. That a person who likes to work as a team member remains so after playing sports. That there is no change within the individual or the community as a result of sports. When we mentioned that you are not supposed to deal with the topic ideologically, we were talking about reality. Ladies and gentlemen, sports as an ideology was supposed to bring out the qualities they've been talking about. They hadn't. Ladies and gentlemen, what was their case? They mentioned that sports bring out the best qualities in the individual, that they bring out the best qualities in the community, and they bring out the best qualities in spectators. Ladies and gentlemen, we showed you how in individuals, members use drugs, use other means such as cheating, they even orchestrate hostilities against each other. They work against each other even at the lowest level at kindergarten. From the Olympics to the kindergarten level, sports have people pitted against each other in a competition. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no harmony, no individual harmony at all. The second point, ladies and gentlemen, the second line part was that about the community. Ladies and gentlemen, when we told you that communities normally at least in the world, react by either really applauding their team on winning or really bantering them when they lose. And that is the normal way it operates. It is more excessive in the third world, maybe more excessive, but it still exists in the developed world. Ladies and gentlemen, no best qualities are brought out in the community. And then when we talk about spectators, they very intelligently forgot to think about all the sports we have, where spectators have been known to fight with each other, have been known to make riots, in fact, while in the stadium. And even after leaving the stadium, when the team has won, they go on to make violent gestures as a form of celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, they have no answer to our case. What is our case? Our case was that sports, in fact, is commercialism. It is violence and intolerance. It is politics as an inherent part of the world in reality. If they have any answer to it, could they even prove for a second that commercialism does not exist in sports? Could they prove even for a second that violence does not come out in sports? Ladies and gentlemen, what they did try to do was confuse you. Ladies and gentlemen, there is only one sentence which explains what sports are nowadays. And I did mention it before, and I'd like to mention it again. Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is sports. And it is surely not the best.
I now have great pleasure in calling on Lucinda O'Brien to present the government speech and reply. Thank you, Lucinda.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but I thought I'd come over here just to see what the other side of the audience looks like. It seems to me that these three individuals up here have been addressing themselves specifically to the three individuals sitting up the back of the hall. And as well as that, this microphone was beginning to look pretty darn lonely up here by itself. Now, from the point of view of our case, this debate has begun to take some very, very scary directions. The opposition's case has begun to look like some kind of horrific nuisance of George Orwell and Imran Khan. I mean, you can never, ever say definitively that sport is either good or bad. What our case has tried to point out to the members of the House is that, among other things, it can bring out some very stirring elements of humanity. Of course there are going to be fallibilities. Of course humanity is not perfect. But you've got to admit, we're pretty good, okay? I mean, we're not terrible. There's got to be something worthwhile in humanity, otherwise we wouldn't have lasted this long. Sport is a reflection of that. Sport is a reflection of the ultimate pinnacle of human achievement. This debate is not about, it's about sport bringing out the best in us. It's not about the creation of some utopian society where there is no violence, there is no political manipulation, and there is definitely no commercialism. Oh, come on. When have you ever noticed a society where commercialism and political gain have not been an element in every aspect of that society? Do you think Adolf Hitler would have been running Nazi Germany if there hadn't been something in his city? I mean, there's got to be benefits, hasn't there, to somebody going out and striving to represent human achievement, human striving for a goal. Now, one thing that I took a great deal of exception to was the continual harping by the opposition that ours has been an example debate. I totally refuse that. Among other things, we have given some examples which we consider exemplary of the Olympic spirit, the human ideal. I think that it would be totally irrelevant to say that we have not made any point to do with the actual ideological cause of this debate. Which brings me to another point. We've been relentlessly accused of being too ideological, too airy-fairy, not realistic enough. Now, as I pointed out in my debate, you can't hope to address any aspect of human society without referring to its ideological premise, its basis. Of course, we have to allow for some deviation in the course of human existence. It's a fact of life. But without moving back to the pure forms of the ideology, we can never fully evaluate or justify its existence. I would like to also point out that in their example, the opposition has never ceased to point out the most exemplary cases of the bad aspects of human nature. Of course they won't do this because they want to win the debate, but I might like to point out to you that theirs has been equally exemplary. They have based their case on just as many examples as we have. Before I finish, I'd just like to sum up what I think has been the crux of the conflict between our two respective teams. Amongst other things, is words unwittingly slipped from my lips in a point of information. Now, I think they have been sadly misinterpreted. Amongst other things, doesn't mean that within all this terrible, tragic evil that has been caused by humanity, there may be one or two little rays of sunshine. What I mean is, among all the vast achievements, the vast glory of human nature, which I challenge you to claim as rhetoric because millions of people through the ages have said the same thing, there are always going to be deviations. Ladies and gentlemen, no one is perfect, but sport can bring out the various little glimpses of perfection that exist within everyone. Thank you.
Verdict? There are one or two things I would say, and I have to make some advertisements too, give some advertisements. So I take the opportunity to explain that the visiting teams from the Czech Republic, Pakistan and New Zealand are in Australia as part of the 1996 World School Debating Championships. Tomorrow each of the three teams hosted by Mehryar High School will debate each of the other two in the first round of the competition. The debates we had today, that's the one you've just seen, and the one between the Czech Republic and Mehryar High School, were introductory debates. The important ones, I guess, from the point of view of our visitors, begin tomorrow. There are 15 nations taking part in the competition this year in Australia. Among the countries taking part are the United States of America, which is the largest country, Argentina, Israel, Malaysia, Canada, and from Britain, England, Scotland and Wales separately. And among others, the smallest country taking part is Bermuda. From here, our visitors will go on to Canberra for the final round, and the grand final will be held in the Great Hall of Parliament House on Wednesday, the 14th of August, starting at 7:30 p.m. If you need further information about that, please see me. I've also been asked to acknowledge the sponsors of this competition, without whom it would not be possible to hold such an event over such a vast area involving so many people. Notably, the Canberra Times, the Australian International Education Foundation, who is the major sponsor, the ACT Government, the Bureau of Sport, Recreation and Racing, and the Australian National University. Oh, and also Approved Systems. Sorry, the Canberra Times is also one of the major sponsors, and we thank all those people. Now we are waiting one of the judges has come forward to give the verdict. Not yet, so we'd like to talk amongst yourselves for a few moments until we hear that. Thank you.
The motion in today's debate was that sport brings out the best in us. And what that kind of motion asks the teams to do is argue about the state of affairs. Whether a state of affairs exists or not. In order to do that, I think it's important for there to be criteria, let's put into a division, something like that, in order to assess whether the state of affairs exists. And I think in this debate, the Affirmative has suffered from that. And what we saw in this debate, I think, was an example of what's called the magically disappearing affirmative bonus. And what that means is that when the Affirmative starts off arguing the debate in a particular way, and then after it's suggested to attack slowly what they're saying that they have to prove gets less and less and less. And so this debate started off with the sport brings out the best for this. The negative response to that was sport says society doesn't necessarily cause a change. And that sport may on occasion bring out the best in us, it may also bring out the worst in us. And here are a lot of examples where that occurs. And so in response to that, the affirmative was coming back to the government or the opposition to say that sport brings out the best, well, but it still brings out the best. And the government's reply was a very good reply, and it identified the debate on where the government should stand on balance. But the adjudicators felt that there was not a summary of the government's case as it had been done from the start. And that in a sustained attack on the government's case, a sustained attack that had a good use of examples and good use of rebuttal, the adjudicators by unanimous decision gave it to Pakistan.
That concludes the debates for this morning. We've had two most entertaining debates, thank you, provided by Pakistan and the Czech Republic, and of course from our own students from Barrel High School, Oxford College, Barrel College and French School. I think they all deserve a round of applause for the
China. Should same-sex marriages be legalised? Should voluntary euthanasia be legalised? And does sport bring out the best in us? These and other burning social and political issues are being addressed and resolved at Barrel High School, all part of the World School Debating Championships.
With the Olympics winding up, the benefits of sport in society is a topical issue.
We want to sport provide opportunities for self-discovery and self-development, remaining free from the imposed constraints of competing political or social ideologies.
These young debaters are fighting out the preliminary rounds of the World School Debating Championships. Teams from 16 countries are currently in Australia, with New Zealand, the Czech Republic and Pakistan competing at Barrel High. On the stage, they're fierce competitors, but it's all in the name of international understanding.
If you have a chance to talk to people who are of a different opinion, and you learn more, and you learn to see the things from both sides.
It's good to get different input from different countries who have different backgrounds and different views on these issues.
And understanding promotes understanding between people and nations as a whole.
Preliminary rounds will continue here at Barrel High tomorrow, with the grand final in Canberra on August 14. John Bennett, Prime Local News.
But have a standing army, and although the main players were a little younger than their New York peers, they were just as impressive at the podium.
Why did the United Nations lose their purpose? Why did the United Nations fail to secure peace in the world? Because they do not have a standing army.
The high school students were taking part in a World Championship debating competition being hosted at Barrel High School. Students from New Zealand, Pakistan, the Czech Republic and Australia are competing in the two-day event. Today saw Barrel High up against the Czechs.
It's a wonderful opportunity for meeting all the teams coming from all over the world, for debating them, for exchanging ideas, and of course we hope for having some time to explore parts of Australia. And if we may hope too much, we would like to see a kangaroo.
In all, 16 teams from throughout the world will take part in the championships, debating at venues across Australia.
The opportunity to engage in debate in the international forum has never been provided for any students. And certainly the Australian team, I don't believe, has any students from the state school system in that team. So this is a wonderful opportunity for public education.
The final will be held at Parliament House, where the top two teams will battle over the subject, should governments regulate the media. Kylie Park, Win News.
In the news ahead, Wollongong
marriages should be legalised. For the government, there is Pakistan, with First Speaker Monida Zadi, second Riyadh Hussain, and third Mehryar Ghazali. And the reply speaker for the government is Riyadh Hussain. On the opposition, there is the Czech Republic. First Speaker Petra Chakova, second Martin Zachary-Smith, and third Thomas Stuck. And the reply speaker for that team is Martin Zachary-Smith. We are very grateful to our major sponsors today, the Australian International Education Foundation, and the speeches will be 8 minutes long, all the primary speeches, with a bell at 1 minute, 7 minutes, and another bell at 8 minutes. There will now be a demonstration of the bell. There will be, after this 4-minute reply speeches, with the opposition giving the first reply speech, the bells will be at 3 and 4 minutes. Points of information are allowed between the first and the 7-minute bell. There are 3 adjudicators today: Judges Evelyn Bowe from the Northern Territory, Tim Stevens from New Zealand, and Mrs. Jackie Smith from Malaysia. First speaker for the government, Monica Zadi.
Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where Robin Williams and Nathan Lane are a sexier box office pair than Robert Redford and Michelle Pfeiffer. The Birdie did much, much better at the box office than up close and personal. The proposition today firmly believes that it is high time that we legalize same-sex marriages. Same-sex marriage would mean when two people of the same sex are united legally for the purpose of living together. Legalize would mean recognized in the eyes of the law. Now what the topic today proposes is that same-sex marriages be recognized by civil law, and the responsibilities and benefits such a legal recognition entails heterosexual couples at the moment be extended to homosexual marriage as well. Now the stance of the proposition today is as follows. We believe that the right to marry whom you please is fundamental, and thus not to allow this right is a violation of that very fundamental right. Also, by this proposed legalization, society is not harmed in any way and may in fact definitely benefit from such a move.
Point of information.
No, thank you. Now the strategy of the proposition today is as follows. I, as the first speaker, will discuss the need for homosexuals to be treated equally with their heterosexual compatriots and the inherent discrimination of any anti-same-sex law against marriage. The second speaker will basically discuss the benefits to homosexuals, the social and legal benefits to homosexuals as an entity in themselves by this proposed legalization, and also the benefits to society as a result. The third speaker will basically rebut. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the proposition today is vehemently opposed to any kind of discrimination. But the only condition in which people make an attempt to justify any sort of discrimination is either A, when national security is at risk, or B, when someone else's rights are being infringed upon. Now, how would the proposed legalization of homosexual marriage pose any risk to national security? And number two, go ahead.
My question is, if you can't have any children by marriage, then how would it be for the security of the country?
Exactly. I don't see how we still allow, by us legalizing same-sex marriage, we still allow heterosexual marriage, there will be marriage. And number two, we still allow sterile couples to get married. You propose that there be a testing system to not allow any sterile couples to get married because there will be no children as a consequence of that union either. And as I was saying, second reason why you can deny anyone's rights is when someone else's rights are being infringed upon. What you're doing by legalizing this marriage is giving someone else their rights, whereas the rights of this society of heterosexuals, etc., and all communities are preserved because they are free to do as they please.
thank you. Now, homosexuals are citizens of country, and they do contribute to society in no less way than anybody else. They pay taxes, etc. So by the granting of a civil marriage license is the beauty of the government. And obviously, since they contribute equally to society, the government should give homosexuals equal protection. And by not doing so, they are being inherently discriminated. Also, what homosexuals are asking for are not affirmative action. Affirmative action that protects minorities such as African American and women who have been discriminated previously. So we are not able to even or willing to give them equality. That is all they are asking for. Now there's this news about these two police officers who've been together for 12 years, longer than most sexual marriages last nowadays. And they could not even collect each other's considerable line of duty death sentences. Now these people are willing to go out and give their lives to protect society. And we are not even able or willing to give them equal protection that would make them able to get the legal benefits that they should get. Yes, go ahead. Okay, so you think that maybe should legalize because they can get money from that? Yes, I think some of the benefits that they would entail would also be monetary benefits, which we do give to heterosexual couples, sterile or otherwise, and I don't see why a gay or homosexual union should reap the same benefits also. Yes, we do have a monetary benefit entailed in those benefits. Also, the Australian Supreme Court recently made a lesbian ex-partner liable to pay over $150,000 in child support. Now, what society is doing is that they're recognizing the function of family. However, we are also giving them the responsibilities that come along with functioning as family. But when it comes to the benefits that they would have reaped from that union, we are denying that. That in itself is inherently discriminatory, and we should legalize same-sex marriages to end this discrimination. Now,
so it seems that can I have a point of information?
No, this is not. Now, 10 years ago, New York extended basic civil rights to homosexuals. And out of the council that voted then, 12 of those who opposed it, when asked would they change the decision now, 11 said yes, they would change the decision and voted in favor of extending basic civil rights to homosexuals. What were they scared of then? They said that we would be scared of major social upheaval, major detriment to society. However, they said that if, in retrospect, there was no detriment to society, and the sky didn't fall in then, so why should it fall in now? Also, I don't think we have to look very far back into our history when we come to the interracial marriage ban. The arguments that are put forward by people who oppose same-sex marriage today are very similar to the arguments that were put forward by the people who destroy and interracial marriages. Now, until as late as 1967 in the United States, they did not allow interracial marriage. The only operative factor in these sort of laws are popular pledges, no risk of harm of any sort to society. No one but a crude racist would defend the rules such as the anti-interracial marriage law today. Society was wrong then. Society is wrong now, and therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we should legalize same-sex marriage.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have to thank you, the Affirmative Project, for organizing this many right arguments. I have something to tell you about same-sex marriages, about legalizing same-sex marriages, because what we heard here was really wrong. Because we, as the Negative Project, of course, believe that same-sex marriages should not be legalized, and we have some pretty strong arguments to prove that. I hope so. First of all, I would like to read you a sentence from the Time magazine from July 22nd, 1996. This sentence goes like this. Marriage is for the time being a union of two people of the opposite sex. So if you legalize same-sex marriages, then of course you would have to change a lot of things in the whole world. And another thing, why should we legalize same-sex marriages? What does it bring for society? That's another thing you have to think about. Now, I would like to tell you, I'm going to talk about historical and actual religious background of the marriages. I would like to talk about probably homosexuality, of course, and most of all, I would like to tell you why we don't think that the same-sex marriage should not be legalized. Then Martin will talk more about dangers for the society of legalizing same-sex marriages, and Thomas will talk about problems that are associated with same-sex actually families having children, same-sex families raising children, and about social problems for those families. According to the historical and religious background, the main purpose of the marriage is to reproduce the mankind. Well, as you can see, no thank you, the same-sex marriages can't do that, not at all. Also, everybody knows, well, hopefully everybody knows the Bible, hopefully, other holy books. So, hopefully everybody knows that God made a woman and a man in the beginning. And this shows that, yes, please?
What about atheists? Should atheists be allowed to marry?
Well, I don't think so. Thank you. Let me finish my sentence now. That God made a woman and a man, as I said, and that shows that what the God actually in the church says about marriages, about partnerships of two, a legalized partnership of two people. It is supposed to be a partnership of two people of the opposite sex. And what did the God say to Adam and Eve? He said, love each other and reproduce. That's what's written in the Bible. Also, if you look in the Bible, one of the greatest sins in Sodom and Gomorrah was that people lived in a homosexual same-sex marriage. So if you legalize same-sex marriages, and you really can't do that, no thank you, it would be against Bible, it would be against church. So even if you legalize those marriages, church will never accept those marriages. No thank you. So if you have people who believe in religion and they are homosexual, they will have to choose between church, between their religion, and between the government, actually.
One information.
Yes, please.
What about religion being against things such as contraception and birth control?
Okay, but I don't think this is the point here. And it's not all of the religions are not. But all of the religions are against homosexuality and against same-sex marriages. Thank you. Also, same-sex marriages are not only against actual religion and against marriages themselves, they are also against nature. Because as we claim homosexuality is against nature, then same-sex marriages are against nature. If you look at two people of the same sex, certain body parts just don't fit. I mean, you have to know that. Also, there is another thing for same-sex marriages. You can't see any other species being engaged in homosexual activities for human beings. That's all that is against nature, yes please?
Have you ever kept two male dogs in contact?
Yes, I have. Thank you. Nothing happened. I didn't have any puppies after them. So, if you look at other species, at other animals, none of them are actually homosexual. Well, people are. This is against nature. Homosexuality is against nature. Same-sex marriages are against nature. I have another pretty strong argument here. Well, hopefully. Depends on the judges, what they think. And this argument talks about actual sexual intercourse. Hope adults here. Hopefully. Okay, if you look at two heterosexual people having sex, other during the sexual intercourse, then they actually can reach the highest level of the relation. No, thank you. And because of this highest level of relation can grow, and it grows actually, into a marriage. If you look at two homosexual people, they can never face each other during sexual intercourse. I'm sorry for that, but they can never really. No, thank you. And as a result of that, it leads to a disability of reaching the stable state of relation, which will lead or which will guarantee a proper and social functioning marriage. So, according to this, sex is not only sex, it has also a lot of feelings involved, and because of homosexuals not being able to face each other during sexual intercourse, they cannot reach the high state of emotion, of feeling that will help them, that will actually guide them into a marriage. So same-sex marriages do not really be legalized, and one of our really greatest pieces of one of our greatest arguments is that, as the affirmative party said, it's discrimination not to recognize homosexuals. We know that. We know that this society really discriminates homosexuals. They don't want to recognize them. So, what do you say? They don't want to recognize homosexuals. They don't want to recognize them as equal people to us. So, why should they recognize same-sex marriages? They won't. So that's why same-sex marriages should not be legalized. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First and foremost, I would like to make it emphatically clear that the act of homosexuality and its models, marriage and remarriage, are not in the context of today's motion. We are discussing the motion in societies, in states where homosexual acts are legal. We are not discussing the act of homosexuality. We are discussing the extension of the legal rights already provided to homosexuals in society to include the right to marriage. Now, moving on to the arguments that presented by the first speaker of the opposition. The first reason she gave for not allowing same-sex marriages to be legalized is because homosexual couples cannot produce children. First and foremost, they can. Scientific technologies such as artificial insemination, such as surrogate parenthood, and even adoption in some countries allows them to bear children. But that is beside the point. We allow heterosexual sterile couples to get married. We do not discriminate against couples who cannot have children if they are heterosexual. Therefore, there is no moral basis to discriminate against sterile homosexual couples. Then they spoke mostly about religion. We said that religion is not in the context of the debate because we are discussing this in secular society where homosexual acts are allowed, the freedom of conscience is provided to citizens. And we made clear that there are a lot of things which religion prohibits, such as contraception, such as adultery, which are legalized by society. In fact, contraception is promoted by society. And therefore, to take up the name of religion only in the case of gays is discriminatory. Yes.
But don't you think that because many people are still religious, many actually more than 50% of the whole entire population of the world?
If people are religious, then they should talk against
between church and government.
If people are religious, why don't they make an outcry against laws promoting adultery? They're only making an outcry against laws discriminating against homosexuals, which do not apply to them. This is a very convenient morality that you are speaking of there. Then, also we would like to make clear that by giving homosexuals the right to get married, we are not infringing on anyone's religious conscience. People who are not comfortable with homosexual marriages do not need to indulge in them. Only people who are religiously and sexually and socially comfortable with engaging in gay relationships or condoning gay relationships with. We are not talking about this tonight. Now, moving on to my own independent argument. Very interestingly, the leader of the opposition just said that marriage is by definition between a man and a woman. Therefore, to let the motion stand would challenge by definition. Well, ladies and gentlemen, marriage for centuries was by definition a union by which a woman became the legal property of her husband, and he changed that. For centuries, marriage was by definition with a union between two people of the same race, and we changed that, ladies and gentlemen. We changed that because it's denied. We changed that because we believe that human dignity is the same, whether you are a man or a woman, black or white. And now by asking you to legalize same-sex marriages, we are asking you to make clear the message that human dignity is the same, whether you are homosexual or heterosexual. The Supreme Court of the United States, when it legalized interracial marriages, which are analogous and vital to the topic today, said, private bias may be outside the reach of the law, but the law cannot directly or indirectly give this bias effect. Yes, a moral consensus or a moral outrage may exist against homosexual marriages, but what you have to remember is that as far back in 1967, a moral outrage did exist against interracial marriages. We can't allow popular prejudice to stand in the way of us making our society an egalitarian and tolerant one. Now, this scope of institution of marriage, ladies and gentlemen, as part of our case, we'd like to make clear that the institution of marriage is already in great trouble. Look around you. Over half of all marriages entered in many countries end up in divorce. It's over a third of children born in France are illegitimate. Yeah.
So you want to connect more marriages, you connect more divorce?
Basically, the link to my argument is your point of information. What I'm saying is that by allowing same-sex marriages, we are encouraging monogamy in a section of the population, and that can only be beneficial to an institution, the institution of marriage in this case, which is already in great trouble. Let's look at the alternative to be providing homosexuals if we deny them the right to marry. First and foremost, a promiscuous single lifestyle. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the age of AIDS. This is the age of sexually transmitted diseases. And if we force homosexuals to live single lives, we are only endangering ourselves. In fact, we are placing homosexuals in a catch-22 stigma, ladies and gentlemen. On the one hand, we accuse them of being promiscuous, but on the other, when they allow ourselves to allow them to enter into a monogamous relationship, we refuse. Let's look at the second alternative we give to homosexuals if we deny them the right to marriage. We force them to go into closeted, partial heterosexual marriages. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not only unfair to both partners involved in this marriage, they're also extremely unhealthy. It is clear that the current alternatives that we are providing to homosexuals by denying them the right to marriage are harming society, and that is why we are asking you to take the third option, the option of letting homosexuals legally express their love, the option of ending discrimination. And that is the second most important benefit society gains by legalizing gay marriages. Society becomes more egalitarian. It becomes more tolerant. And ladies and gentlemen, I feel that I can proudly say that at this time in the 20th century, we do value being egalitarian. We do value being tolerant. And also, ladies and gentlemen, marriage has been sociologically proven to have civilizing and stabilizing effects in society. And these will be felt by all people, homosexuals and heterosexuals alike. Now that I've told you about the benefits to society by legalizing gay marriages, let's talk about the benefits to gays themselves. They get several legal benefits, not least amongst them social security, inheritance rights, pension rights, caretaking rights, the right to make life and death decisions for partners, the right to insurance, and as mentioned by my first speaker, the right to Western benefits. Let's look at the human side of this picture. There is a in the United States is currently a case going on of a paraplegic homosexual who had been with his lover for 35 years, and now that he is ill, his lover is being denied access to him, but his lover is being denied his right to take care of him. Now, let's talk about the social benefits of homosexuality. Homosexuals are one of the most socially deprived groups and socially and emotionally deprived groups in the world today. The suicide amongst gay teenagers at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, is 3 times that of their heterosexual counterparts. Once we legalize homosexual marriages, ladies and gentlemen, the message we are sending out to these people is that it's okay to come out of the closet. That it's okay to stop hating yourself. It's okay to stop going into self-destructive darkness. Ladies and gentlemen, the only reason presented by the opposition so far to not legalize gay marriages, apart from the third sexual connotation that they just made, is that popular prejudice does exist. And we said, yes, popular prejudice exists, and slap it in the face, and let same-sex marriages be legalized. We thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear members of the House, I thank the Affirmative Party for sending us nice fairy tales. When I was a child, my mother used to read Hans Christian Andersen to me, and I like it very much. That's why I like the speech they've just had. First of all, let me tell you that they did not challenge the definition we have challenged. We're saying that if nowadays, for the time being, a marriage can be defined only as the union of two people of opposite sex, because now same-sex marriages have not been legalized yet, and that's the motion of this debate. We're saying that if you violate the second rule, that is by having the second rule is having people of opposite sex in marriage. If you violate this rule, and if you redefine that to people of the same sex, then, in other words, if marriage is redefined to include two men in love, on what possible principles grounds can it be denied to 3 men in love, or 4 men in love, or 25 men in love? Thank you, denied. And I'm asking you, ladies and gentlemen, isn't that polygamy? Isn't more than 2 people in marriage? Isn't that polygamy? Doesn't polygamy lead, no, thank you, denied. Doesn't polygamy lead to degradation of the people there? Doesn't it lead to a degrading competition among wives? Isn't that possessing the wives, in other words? Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it is. If we violate the second rule I've just said, we're going to have to allow incest. We're going to have to allow brothers marrying sisters, thank you. And if we do that, in 25 years, we will see only walking idiots, not people. We've seen that. We have seen that in Europe. Yes, yes.
Incest is in itself an illegal act. We should have got a right to legalize it.
Well, I agree with you. That's what I'm saying. But if you violate the rules we've just said, then you're going to have to allow incest too. And speaking of Europe in the Middle Ages, the royal families used to get married among each other, and the result was really bad, as you know from history books. Let me just go back to some of the arguments that the Affirmative Party brought. They said they agreed with us that, well, they didn't agree that the main purpose of marriage is to produce children, but they said that there are other ways how lesbians, for example, can have children. That's true. But are there going to be troubles associated with raising the children? Now, I don't want to talk about this really much because Thomas specializes in that, and Thomas will bring you a complete coverage of that. It will be too difficult. Another thing that they mentioned is that marriage, where 2 people are alone, is a popular prejudice. Well, it might be a prejudice, but if it wasn't a prejudice, that we would die. There'd be no people, there'd be no children. If you had only homosexual marriage in the world only, then within 100 years, you would die. Yes, please. Speaker number 3.
This debate is not about only homosexual marriages. It's about whether the right should be given to homosexuals as well.
But isn't that what I just said? I was talking about the right of those people to get married, and I'm saying that they shouldn't have the right to do that. I'm saying that I'm not saying that they should not. I'm not saying that they shouldn't live I'm not saying that they shouldn't live together. I'm just saying that the relationship shouldn't grow into a marriage. Another thing is promiscuous lifestyle. Well, I didn't really understand that argument, because if you have it's proven that relations among men or relations among people of the same sex are not very stable. No, thank you. So by allowing them to get married, you'll have actually more promiscuous lives than this, because they will not be able to live together for a long time. And another thing is that it can never be accepted by church. So somebody has said here that there are many divorces in the world. That's true, they are. But those are divorces of people who were not married in the church. And homosexuals would not be able to get married in the church, no. So why should we allow them to get divorced? And if the relationship is not stable, and if we legalize same-sex marriages, then we could have 13 divorces a year. So I think that would increase the promiscuous lives there. Now let me concentrate on some of my arguments. I've already said that it would mean danger by legalizing it would lead to allowing other things. That's, for example, polygamy or things like that. I've spoken about incest and other things. And realize, please, that family is the basis of the society. If there was no family, there would be no society. People live together. That's the soul of this relationship, to live together. And the task is to have children. So family is the basis of the society. And by destroying the traditional family, I mean family where you have mother, father, and children, you would destroy the whole society. And destroying the society, that would be extremely dangerous, of course. No. It is also dangerous for homosexuals themselves to get married. Imagine, once they admit that they are homosexuals, and that will happen if they get married, then they'll be exposed to certain pressure by the society. And that might lead to job losses. That might lead to suicide attempts. No, thank you. That might lead to their taking drugs. And there will be other problems associated with that. In other words, the speaker of the Affirmative Party has said that by legalizing the marriage, by equalizing heterosexual and homosexual marriages, the homosexuals would be able to have their Social Security, would be able to pay for their Social Security. But my question is, if they lose jobs, then do they have money to pay for that? So that's another trouble. Of course, they'll be able to, no, thank you. Of course, they would be able to do that, but with losing jobs and with being unemployed, I don't think they'll be able to pay that. Also, that's the Social Security. And as I said before, relationships are not stable. So by allowing people of the same sex living in marriage, it will lead even to more trouble. Imagine that. And there was an example of a lady in the United States. She was working in a bank, and she had this relationship with a girl, of course, of the same sex, and she was fired just because of that. So of course, we have to talk about discrimination, and by legalizing same-sex marriages, we would increase the discrimination of the homosexual couple. No, thank you. So that is actually what we're afraid of. Of course, we know about the threat of discrimination, but by legalizing same-sex marriages, we would only increase that. So there would be more homosexuals being targeted of various attacks and things like that. At the end of the speech. Sorry. Good. Now, let me just read another thing to you. I'm not used to that microphone, so. Then, in other words, what the Affirmative Party is saying, if gay marriages are all right, and I've already said that at the beginning of my speech, then what about polygamy? And what about incest? That is the point. That's the main point I was trying to make. And you have that the married couple would be, if the married couple is unrelated to each other, then it's good, of course, because the genetic information flows and it exchanges, and you've got smarter people. But if you have, because man, mostly they have, I can't say they have the same genetic information, but it's different than women do. And as you know, there always has to be two for a tango. They're not going to be able to have children if you have too many love. Anyway, we're saying that by legalizing same-sex marriages, you would have to legalize a whole bunch of other things, and maybe you might legalize voluntary shooting at the streets. Thank you.
The second speaker from the opposition ended his speech and said, why not legalize shooting in the streets? That if this is his analogy, ladies and gentlemen, then he is a prime example of the discrimination that you see in society today against homosexuals. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, their belief is that once homosexual rights in itself are discriminatory, that homosexual rights should not be granted, and homosexuals are something alien to this planet, ladies and gentlemen. That is not in the context of this debate. And you can see what kind of belief that the opposition here very sharply holds, ladies and gentlemen, when they say things such as legalizing marriage as a parallel to legalizing shooting in the streets. Ladies and gentlemen, let's pick up their arguments right from the beginning. The first speaker's entire case was based upon religion and how it is a loss to the concept of sex.
Ladies and gentlemen, the proposition has here brought about new sexual revolutions, if that is what they are attempting, trying to introduce new sexual ideas which I have never heard ever in my life, and I'm sure none of you have ever heard things like that. For example, ladies and gentlemen, if homosexuals were making love don't want to look at each other. Well, what do they do when the French kiss for one, ladies and gentlemen? This is something that opposition doesn't understand. And ladies and gentlemen, it was quite square because, I mean, I never heard about such a thing that homosexuals don't look at each other. Perhaps that is coming from personal experience somewhere on the opposition side. Ladies and gentlemen, another very peculiar thing is, their concept here, the sole purpose of marriage is reproduction. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when I was born, my parents never said that you must marry so you can have a lot of babies. And ladies and gentlemen, my religion never said that you only marry so that you can have a lot of babies. If there, ladies and gentlemen, what's the answer? What the opposition here envisions is that man was sent into this world to be breeders. The purpose of man was to have lots and lots of babies, and every country should have population 10 times the size of China, and therefore God would be happy and religion would agree. That is what the opposition, ladies and gentlemen, is willing to propose.
The main task of marriage is not to have children, what will be when we die.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, what they say is that when you get married, it is essential to have children. Therefore, if you do not have children, the population growth will completely come to a stand, and within 100, 200 years, there won't be anyone living on the planet because there won't be any children around because married couples would not be producing children. That is an absurd argument, ladies and gentlemen. When we say that homosexual couples be granted the right of marriage, it is their option. It is the option for heterosexual couples as well if they would like to have children. It is not compulsory. When you take the oath of marriage, ladies and gentlemen, be it any Christian church or be it a Muslim church, whatever, you never say, I swear that I will have children, otherwise I will go to hell. There is no law such as that, ladies and gentlemen. That is what the opposition here very firmly believes. So, ladies and gentlemen, that part of their thing, for one, their sexual ideas, and the religious part is completely ridiculous. We pointed out, ladies and gentlemen, that religion does not infringe upon, once if you sanction homosexual marriages, you won't be infringing upon someone else's homosexual, someone else's religious viewpoint, ladies and gentlemen. And ladies and gentlemen, so many things, so many wrong things have been done in the name of religion. Why do we want to add to it by just picking up the banner of religion and saying, well, simply because religion says that homosexual marriages should not be legalized, ladies and gentlemen. If religion says that contraception and birth control is not good, ladies and gentlemen, then does that mean that we say that while we will go on producing the greatest population that can fill up the entire universe, ladies and gentlemen, simply to please today's opposition? Please go ahead.
What about more than a half portion of the world that believe in religion, that believe in not neglecting religion?
Thank you very much, John. I get your point. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about half of the people in the world who believe in religion. Perhaps there are more than 50% who believe in religion, ladies and gentlemen. But a lot of people also believe in religion, and a lot of people who believe in religion are also homosexual. A lot of people who also believe in religion practice birth control, also go through contraception and things even such as abortion, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, what they're trying to imply here is that if you do not practice birth control, something of the sort, an analogy would be, ladies and gentlemen, if you do not practice birth control, you are not religious. Is that the point that the opposition here is trying to put across to you, ladies and gentlemen? Then they have the idea that a homosexual marriage can never be stable. That is in itself absurd, ladies and gentlemen. We have told you that heterosexual marriages have been just as unstable, the divorce rates going up at an enormous rate, especially in the developed countries, ladies and gentlemen. Then the idea, the second speaker, his entire purpose was to establish the social law. And he came up and said things like incest, mentioned incest, that this is the same as legalizing incest. For one, incest is illegal, ladies and gentlemen, and there is no debate about legalizing it. It's denied. So why does the opposition come up with such ideas? I don't know where they come up from anyway. Denied stuff. Then they mentioned things such as promiscuity would increase, and polygamy, ladies and gentlemen, that one gay man would go and have 25 gay wives or whatever, husbands or whatever it may be. Ladies and gentlemen, this is in itself again for one a sweeping statement and a rather absurd one. Perhaps I've never heard of any homosexual wanting to do that or demanding the right. And in fact, even in heterosexual marriages, in secular countries, in the developed world, polygamy is not allowed. Especially in most religions, and not practiced in most parts of the world, denied them. Ladies and gentlemen, Similarly, we've heard things about loss of jobs and that homosexuals would end up taking drugs, etc., etc., etc. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the point. These people then would be discriminated against. Why not legally give them the same rights as heterosexuals as other people so that no one can discriminate against them, deny it? Give them the protection of the judiciary. Give them the protection of the law so that these people, denied, can come out of the closet, ladies and gentlemen, and say what they want to say and do what they want to do and have security, the security that the second speaker very fairly mentioned as the opposition very fairly did not understand, ladies and gentlemen. I am sure, ladies and gentlemen, the third speaker is going to come and talk about family and about children. Well, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Right, just before he comes to mention these things. Children in heterosexual marriages, for one, even grow up to be homosexual. Therefore, if they bring up the idea that homosexual children will be born and that homosexuality will be given birth to, then the same occurs in heterosexual marriages. And even if they come up with the idea, ladies and gentlemen, that is again a bigoted idea. That means that they're against the very concept of homosexuality. If they're against the very concept of homosexuality, ladies and gentlemen, then they should not be debating here. Because once they're debating here, they must accept that homosexuality is something that is not wrong. There is nothing wrong with that, ladies and gentlemen. The proposition, ladies and gentlemen, we the proposition have given you good, clear arguments. We've told you, ladies and gentlemen, why the homosexuals need to be given rights. The opposition there, ladies and gentlemen, has been there talking about sexual innuendos and God knows what else, because we have not understood their analyses and their ideas. I beg you, ladies and gentlemen, to let the motion stand. Thank you.
But there was a big understanding in the affirmative scheme, this misunderstanding the affirmative scheme, and I must explain many things. But first, before I do, I must thank the first speaker for bringing such a nice movie like Birdcage in this motion. In Birdcage, Robin Williams had to face very funny elements and very funny events indeed. But let's talk realistic. The real life doesn't always end that happy as it did in the Birdcage. Another weak, very irrelevant argument was about the two policemen gays happily lived 12 years together. Ladies and gentlemen, my grandparents lived 45 years happily together, so I don't really see the point here. And of course, my grandparents were heterosexual. About discrimination, the society is unfortunately not ready yet to accept the homosexual marriages without discrimination yet.
The 1967 society was also unfortunately not ready to accept interracial marriages. Do you believe that they should not have been legalized?
Well, they should have been legalized probably a bit later, because now the society would be ready. About why not legalize shooting? The affirmative party was completely criticizing the speech of the second speaker of my group, of our party, about shooting in the cities. Ladies and gentlemen, this was just an example. If you legalize homosexual marriages, and if you legalize them, and we think that the homosexual marriages should not be legalized because of all these points that we have brought up, then why don't you legalize polygamy? When people say, well, what's wrong? What's wrong with marrying many people? What's wrong with that? Then, why don't you legalize, I don't know, incest? Why don't you... Yes, please.
The act of homosexuality is legal, incest is illegal.
What about polygamy?
In secular countries, it's illegal.
So, you destroyed my speech. Thank you very much. Split between government and church. The religion is a very interesting point. The religion needs to be taken into consideration because the religion is very strong in our world. How would it be in our society when there would be a big split between government and church? The church would never accept the idea of homosexuals getting engaged. There would be a big split between government and church. There was no split between government and church when the interracial marriages were taken place in 1978. Sex and marriage. About the sexual intercourse, please. Sexual intercourse, according to our book,
according to our book, which is from the evangelistic point of view. Sexual intercourse is one of the things that holds the marriage together. It holds the marriage together. When this sexual intercourse cannot be done properly, as with the homosexuals, which surely cannot, the marriage will never last that long. Yes.
Do you feel that we should have potency tests that we also make? Do you feel that we should have potency tests that we also will show that couples will have sex with?
Well, sorry, I cannot answer that question because I did not understand it and I don't want to lose any more time of mine. Sex and marriage, and there is also another thing that holds the marriage together, and this is children. Children and sex hold the marriage together, and when the sexual intercourse cannot be done properly, more divorces will take part denied, more divorces will take part, and as far as I am concerned, the divorce rate is already very high at this point, and we don't want the divorce rate be any higher. About age, how come that the affirmative party is claiming that once the homosexuals have the possibility or have the opportunity to get engaged, that they won't be sleeping with other men, with other women? Then it is that there is no. That's the same with heterosexual marriages. It happens all the time. We are not happy about that. Denied. We are not happy about that, but it happens. Unfortunately, it does. And now let me please talk about children a little bit. Children are our future. They sure are. No one can deny that. There will be problems associated with raising children. No one can deny that either. Once same-sex marriages will be legalized, there will be these problems. Their children, our future, their beloved, will have a hard time finding friends in school. In schools, the children experience one of the biggest discriminations that they will ever have the opportunity, or in quotes, have the opportunity to experience in the rest of their life. And why? Why should they be exposed to such a pressure, which will be damaging to their future development? And what about the homosexuals themselves? Would they want their children to be exposed to such pressure? Denied. Because once they admit that, the facts will be generally known. Once they admit that by getting engaged, the facts about their feelings and about their living together will be generally known about by their entire surroundings. That will lead to discrimination by the surroundings. By that, not only their children and relatives will suffer from prejudice and other pressures of this society, but also homosexuals themselves will have to face the pressure. And that is why we claim that same-sex marriages shall I repeat this again, same-sex marriages should not be legalized even for the own sake of the homosexuals themselves. Because the fact that two people of the same sex living together are homosexuals is much less known to the society than if they got married. If they are not married yet, they can hide it and prevent the pressures by the society. But once they are declared married, the fact is present and the fact is known. And that is why same-sex marriages should not be legalized, because of the necessity to prevent the homosexuals and their close ones and the society from such undesirable and damaging elements. There is a big danger of spreading homosexuality among the children as well. Because we must prevent the unnecessary spreading of homosexuality for the sake of preventing the society from discriminating the homosexuals. The only way how to prevent the society from discriminating the homosexuals is not to allow same-sex marriages, which would result to growing discrimination, unwanted even by the homosexuals. So the fact that same-sex marriages should not be legalized is even the mistake of the homosexuals themselves, as I said for part of this debate. In the marriage, there certainly must be the absence of either the mother or the father. Everyone knows the saying, there always has to be two for a tango. Two mothers would raise the child to effeminate. Two fathers would raise the child in too much a practical way. So the absence of either the mother or the father will never lead to a harmonic, balanced education by the parents. These all facts propose that same-sex marriages should not be legalized. Thank you very much.
same-sex marriages be legalized just because homosexuals want them to be legalized? Aren't there any other side effects that this legalization could have? Isn't that a totally different example from the 1967 legalization of interracial marriages? I think it is. Imagine the harmful effects for the whole society. Imagine that your kids could be abused in the street every time by homosexuals running around, by people of, well, basically, by people of the same sex they are. So don't you think this would have very harmful effects for the whole society? I think it would. First of all, let me concentrate to our major arguments. We said quite clearly that we support our theory by four major arguments. First one is danger of that. Danger of legalism. And I've spoken about incest and polygamy. I think it wasn't really understood the way I wanted it to be understood. But we were saying if we legalize something like that, then somebody could say, why not legalize something else? Because the definition of a marriage today, and I'd like to repeat it once more, is that it's the union of two people of the opposite sex. And if we redefine that to three women in love, for example, then it's or two women in love, then why not three men in love? And that opens way to a wider range of problems in the society. That opens a way to a wider range of troubles that we're not going to be able to cope with. Somebody said that incest is illegal. That is the member of the opposition team. That's true. But are same-sex marriages legal? Not yet. So it was actually our argument. Thank you very much for that. Then the second argument was just religious background. People used to marry only the members of the opposite sex, and they knew why. They knew why. For some reason, the Bible is full of that. I bet that Quran also has some parts about that. So they knew why probably because imagine that we would legalize same-sex marriages now, the church would never accept it, and there are 1,300,000,000 Christians in the world, and they would say no, we don't accept it either. It would be a great split in the world. Suddenly you have people fighting over that issue. So that would be a great threat to society, of course. Then another thing from the religious perspective is Greece and Rome. Look at those ancient civilizations. They did not, although they did not really allow same-sex marriages, they had them. And how did those civilizations end up? Well, everybody knows about that. Of course, it was not the only reason, but they didn't end up well. Another argument is that society is not ready for it yet. It would be more discrimination than it is now. It would be actually very bad, and we've spoken about some examples of people getting fired from jobs, and we've spoken some racial examples and things like that. The fourth argument is children. As Thomas spoke in here a little while ago, he said that it would be very hard for homosexuals to raise children. Not only because it's spreading homosexuality, which is another argument, but just because in a family, if there are two women in a family, there would be the absence of a father. If there are two fathers in a family, there would be the absence of a mother. So the result of that marriage would be a man or a woman that would not be absolutely normal. So, and that would be quite sad if you imagine that by allowing it, there'll be more and more couples getting into it. Also, I'd like to say that we're not claiming that people of the same sex shouldn't, we're not saying that they shouldn't live together in a partnership. Well, why? If they want to do it, let them do it. But what we are saying is that this partnership they have should not grow into a legalized marriage. And we have supported that by 4 or 5 of our major arguments, mainly concerned about society and about the effects on society, and many, many other reasons for that. So we claim that same-sex marriages should not be allowed, and we stand firmly resolved about that. Thank you very much.
Today we debated a motion which required for us to look deep into ourselves and ask ourselves the question, what kind of society do we want? Do we want a society in which our people live in hiding, in fear and self-loathing? Or do we want a society in which people live with dignity, and more importantly, equal dignity? A society in which people stare prejudice in the face every day and slap it across the face every time. The first society is the one advocated by the opposition. we ask you to advocate respectfully. In his reply speech, the second speaker of the opposition equated all homosexuals to pedophiles, asking you that once we legalize homosexuals, your children will not be safe on the street. That kind of misconception, ladies and gentlemen, has been difficult to break. Let's look at this. There are three major lines of argument. In the first line of argument, they argue that homosexuality is immoral. We pointed out that we are not arguing the merit and demerit of the act of homosexuality, which is already legal in most countries and beyond the scope of the motion. Besides that, we cannot apply religion as the basis for denying homosexuals the right to marriage, because religion does not shape the rest of our laws. Specifically, the laws concerning adultery, contraception, and abortion. To confine religion and virtue only to the instances of homosexuality, ladies and gentlemen, is discrimination. And then they talked about homosexual sexual position in the literal sense. Well, we would like to make it clear that in a state, all citizens, be they heterosexual or homosexual, their sex lives are their own business. Not anyone else's. No one else has the right to criticize which way they face up and which way they face down. The second line of argument, ladies and gentlemen. The second line of argument, unsubstantiated one was, that is about the dangers that this legalization would bring to society. They said that once we legalize homosexual marriages, by some kind of domino effect, incest will also be legalized. But firstly, I would like to make it very clear, and basically not to get this point, that the act of homosexual intercourse is already legal. The act of incestuous intercourse is not legal. There is no movement to legalize it, and there's absolutely no moral support for it. I fail to see the linkage. And secondly, moving on to the polygamy analogy, we could quite easily say that once we allow one man to marry one woman, there is nothing stopping us from allowing one man to marry two women. This danger applies equally to heterosexual marriages as it does to homosexual ones. And I saw a historical pattern in this. These stale examples and these stale analyses of incest and polygamy were brought up again and again in the 1960s.